So, from the High Peaks Wilderness, I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. My name is Leah Prime, and this is the Invisible Night School. For those of you just joining us, the Invisible Night School is a small consortium of lay researchers and scholars pursuing the study and exploration of ufology, high strangeness, and the phenomenon. INS is not a monolith. We represent varied ideas, backgrounds, disciplines, and experiences, and seek to engage in good faith dialogue with other curious minds. Tonight, we are super excited to welcome Michael Huntington. I'm also personally very excited to be back after a brief hiatus of a few weeks. Super delighted to see some of our friends and fans in the audience, as usual. Hi to Simon. Jim, what's going on? V. Rock Esty, yes, congratulations. Thank you. Yes, I was away getting engaged, so I now have like an engagement ring on. I have incredibly found someone who wants to spend all of eternity with me. This boggles my mind as well as it boggles everyone else's. Thank you and hi to Spooky. Super excited for your upcoming travel. Vapor Missiles, what's going on? Jan, and of course, the Earth. It's like the who's who of all my favorites in the audience tonight. So before I welcome them onto the stream, I'd just love to give you guys some background on Michael Huntington. He's a paranormal travel writer, blogger, and UFO researcher from Cape Girardeau, Missouri, who's investigated the unusual since the 1970s. He's traveled to hundreds of places in the US with his family, documenting strange locations and lost lore, building a paranormal location GPS research database with thousands of locations. His writings and photography work can be found across the social media landscape on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and on the Strange Travels blog, the occasional print medium, and in the eventually to be released Strange Travel book series. So we are super excited to bring Michael onto the show this evening. So without any further delay, I'm going to bring on my co-hosts. Lewis, wonderful to see you. Campbell, great job running the show in my absence. I went back and listened to you read the intro. I was very impressed.
Thank you.
Also, I did want to also say I was delighted that you even kept from the Great Northern Wilderness, because that applies as much to you as it does to me.
If not more so, since
possibly
I'm
more so,
north.
yes. Of course, our resident dubious layman, Nick. How are you, friend?
Good. How are you?
Yes, wonderful to see all of you, and of course, the man of the hour, Mike Huntington. Mike.
Hello.
Hey, Mike.
Hello. So nice to have you here.
Thank you.
I think, Leah, I think you left something out of his intro. I think you forgot to mention that he was the youngest associate of APRO at one time. Isn't that true, Michael?
Yeah, I got involved in this subject when I was a kid. Growing up in the 70s, we sort of had all this UFO stuff all around us on television and movies, tabloid. It was sort of everywhere. And I was captivated by some of the cases of the time, especially the Travis Walton case and the Stanford abduction. Those things sort of piqued my interest. My family was okay with that. They encouraged that. They got me all of the UFO magazines and all of the books and all the tabloid stuff. Pretty much everything related to the subject. And I dove into it. I got interested in it. When I was 8 years old, I had pictures of Travis Walton getting zapped by a UFO on my wall, and I wanted to pursue, being a ufologist, and that was something that I always was interested in. And I started writing to organizations in the late 70s, and a lot of them were trying to do the scientific approach. So when I wrote to UFOs and NICAP and APRO and all of them, it was like, okay, kid, yeah, whatever, you can get a subscription or whatnot. But APRO, I sort of went after, and I think pestered them into making me an associate.
And what is that acronym? Just for
the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. It was one of the leading civilian investigative organizations throughout like the 60s and the 70s. It's Jim and Carol Lorenzen out of Tucson, Arizona. ran that, and they were promoting, a scientific approach to UFOs back then, in the 60s and the 70s, as were, groups like UFO Studies and others, and they, so they were looking for scientists and all that, but I think Jim died in like 84, 85, and then Carol soon after, and then Hynek was gone by 86. So sort of before that period, it was sort of the end of APRO, when I got involved. So they were gracious enough to let me have a card and do all that. I got it somewhere, and I got all my bulletins still, and later on went on to join like MUFON and all that. And I studied philosophy of science at Southeast Missouri here, focusing on pseudoscientific demarcation. I didn't graduate. I was one of those guys that took every philosophy course, and like a lot of philosophers, you either become a professor or you're a fry cook, or you're working a lot of different jobs. I ended up I worked in politics. I had a video store. I did some filmmaking. Got married, had kids, did a lot of different stuff that sort of diverted me from different paths. But yeah, that's my background. The UFO thing's always been there.
You said that you went to school at Southeast Missouri. Is that right?
Yes.
And is that not the place where Rutledge, Dr. Harley Rutledge, the solid state physicist, taught? And if I'm right, wasn't he one of the first private sector, public sector scientists to lead an extensive UFO field study nearby?
Yeah. I'm in Cape Girardeau. Cape Girardeau does have a considerable amount of UFO lore as well as contributions. I live in Cape, but I'm originally from St. Louis, which likewise also has a history of contributions to the field. That's where the St. Louis flying saucer groups ended up forming MUFON out of the St. Louis flying saucer clubs. Ted Phillips, one of the greatest researchers ever, was from Central Missouri, and yes, Southeast Missouri, my alma mater, had Dr. Harley Rutledge, who was the chair of the astronomy department at Southeast in the 60s and the 70s. Legitimate scientist, trained astronomers that went on to great careers, including some at least one astronaut. And he was sort of intrigued by the subject beginning, I think, in 1973, when there was a wave of sightings throughout Missouri, especially around the Piedmont, Missouri area, which is not too far from here. It's like an hour and a half or 2 hours. All throughout that area, it was called the Brushy Creek Wave, or the Brushy Creek Scare. Literally hundreds and hundreds of people claim to have seen UFOs. Entire teams, police, civic people, teachers, including an entire drive-in movie theater filled with people were seeing things during that time period. And Dr. Rutledge went over to investigate, and it was worth investigating. Ted Phillips and Dr. Hynek also came down and investigated, but Dr. Rutledge saw that there was some sort of sustained phenomena that people were experiencing, that they were seeing something, that it wasn't just all mass hysteria, that there was, if there's something tangible, then it can be documented and it can be studied. And he was in the position to be able to do that, and he launched Project Identification, which was the first university level field study of anomalies. And it went on for like 6 years, 7 years, and it used all different kinds of academics and graduate students and such, and they documented the lights at Piedmont and the wave that was going on in Ellsbury, Missouri, in the late 70s, and which also had cattle mutilations there. So yeah, he was, I think, he was an inspiration to me. It was one of the reasons I came down here. He had already retired by the time I came down here, but just knowing that I'd be able to go here and be involved in some of the history. Cape also has a UFO crash story too, and some other interesting folklore. So I'm glad to be down here.
You touched on something earlier, and I want to bring it back up again before we get too far away from it. You mentioned growing up in the 70s and being kind of surrounded by UFOs in the culture. Mm-hmm. I noticed, like, personally, I've noticed you posting a lot of kind of UFO culture and ephemera throughout the decades. How important do you think that culture and that saturation is to kind of the overall narrative of UFOs as we understand them now? Because I don't think a lot of people now realize how popular and actually mainstream it was in the past.
Yeah, well, this is something that's always sort of happened within at least the UFO culture, which is part of the broader history. That within the culture, there are all these different subcultures. There are all these different periods of time, all these different influencers. So the wheel is pretty much reinvented every 10 years or so, I would think. And it's also a subject where people come in and go out. Very rarely do people sort of dive into it and they stay in it for a long period of time. I've been involved in this for like 46 years. There's a few people like that, but I think a lot of people, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 or 30, you got some of those older folks up there. And I think you have a lot of younger people, since 2017, due to all the, the mass media and the hype and everything, and not knowing the stuff that had come before in the history, and not knowing that a lot of this sort of, these movements and these and such, they're very periodic, and they sort of come and go, and we have to learn from the history. But I grew up in the 70s, and I think that was sort of a golden age for the subject. I mean, it was, yes. People talk about, disclosure having occurred because of, movies and TV and all that. And it's like, you weren't around. You weren't around back then, in like 1978, it was everywhere. Close Encounters, In Search Of, tabloid National Enquirers, you had Project UFO, you had all the science fiction stuff, magazines and everything. It was everywhere within the culture, and I think that was sort of a golden age, and I think it became sort of a missed opportunity, into the 80s and the 90s. UFOtainment became more of a thing, and the narratives, the stories became exploitable, and we got these cultural narratives, Area 51 and Whitley Strieber, Communion, all that sort of stuff. These things came in and sort of pushed the just the basic scientific aerial anomaly to the side, and I think it's sort of been brought back in the form of UAPs for political purposes. Right. That at least that modicum of being scientific, but you can't disavow all the other strange stuff that goes with it. But
I noticed the language you used there, aerial anomalies. We talk a lot about how language is kind of important in this topic, just to be on the same page as everyone. But you, since I've met you, you've been kind of advocating for a reform of ufology. Can you kind of explain to us all what you mean by that, and even how you define ufology? since language is kind of a sticking point for some people.
Right. Well, there's some people that don't like the term ufology now. You know, there's some people out there for various reasons that want ufology to die, and they want to kill it, and they've said so, which is sort of perplexing. You know, it's sort of like, you know, you want to rebrand something, so you have to get rid of the previous iteration in order to keep your control there. But ufology is the study of UFOs.
Sure.
And it will always, you know, be that. Even if you say UAP or aerial anomalies or whatever, people are going to say, you know, what's a UAP? You're going to say it's a UFO. So the study of that, I think, there's already enough history, there's already enough literature, there's already enough of a cultural influence, there's already been movements and personalities and political influences of the subject, you know, upon the culture. I mean, it's undeniable that the subject is a legitimate subject worthy of study. A lot of people sort of get that confused and think that ufology is a cause. And, you know, to them, it's the disclosure cause, you know, which they seek confirmation. They seek officialdom to recognize their view, confirm their view, their interpretation of what they think is behind, which has become sort of a collection of everything UFO.
Yeah.
Okay, which just drives me nuts. And it's sort of become this thing called the phenomenon, almost like a deification, like an entity where we had all these various mysteries and we've just collected them together into one big giant basket. And I blame Vallée and Keel, you know, in a lot of ways for this, because, you know,
I see what you're
everybody's trying to create some sort of unified field, you know, for everything paranormal, and it may be there or may not be there, but I think the best way is to look at cases on an individual basis, and to judge everything in common sense terms and in practical terms, and judge likelihoods, and not, you know, blow smoke up each other's ass about things. You know, if there's a legitimate interpretation that makes more sense than this one, let's go with this. Everybody is, you know, so bound up in their viewpoints that they just want to dismiss and put aside evidence. It's all competing interpretations ultimately. And you know, this subject is it's not a cause, it's not a mystery, it's the mystery, it's a collection of mysteries, it's a lot of things. It's a history and a subculture, and I think it's legitimate as a multi-field disciplinary field of study, just as legitimate as, say, you know, women's studies or native studies. I think there's enough of a history there to legitimize that, and to legitimize the scientific ufology, and to legitimize the history, and legitimize the subject in a sociological way, in a psychological way, and, you know, through all these different lenses. And it is also a question of shifting paradigms. It's at the heart of it. And this is, you know, what I stress more than anything. At the heart of it, it's a philosophical issue, not just the UFO stuff, but what constitutes science, what constitutes evidence, what demarcates legitimate methodology from pseudoscience. Okay, what is evidence sufficiency? You know, what evidence is it going to take? If you're going to have a paradigm shift, what does that mean? Does it mean that you convince everybody on the planet to believe a certain thing, or do you need to have some sort of method-based evidentiary basis that you can present to the establishment? Because that's who you're convincing. You're not convincing the people who are watching History Channel. That's not how you change a paradigm. That's how you get a belief system or a religion But if you're trying to change the consensus, you have to change the establishment. And I'm all in favor of that. And I'm in favor of using the media. I'm in favor of using science, even politics. But the problem is, like with the history of UFOs, as it's always been, it gets manipulated. It gets manipulated by politics, by intelligence people, by entertainers, lawyers, UFO celebrities, and everybody wants to have these narratives so they can be an insider, when what we should be doing is we should be honest with everything and open with everything and transparent with everything. And ufology needs to reform itself. It needs to take itself seriously. It needs to reform its conferences and not make them infomercials for UFO celebrities. And it needs to have real conferences and not secret stuff where everybody's whispering stuff and, we're waiting for the noon drop so that, somebody can get their clicks. No, we need to build a real community. And the reason you don't have a real community is because you have people that have been brought in as political pawns in a lot of ways. And they haven't done the research. They haven't done the homework. For a lot of people, UFOs began in 2017 or 2004. There's a whole history there that needs to be learned. We need to teach it. We need to educate it. We need to go for legitimacy. We need to cut out the intelligence games stuff. We need to start having conferences on the future of the subject, not as an infomercial for a new TV show, or so that we can hobnob and take pictures with people that we want to autograph our books. We need to get away from that UFO celebrity culture. There shouldn't be a stage here and then everybody else down here watching. There should be workshops. There should be people talking about these issues. There should be competitions between field projects. We should get these places laid out. That's why I do a lot of mapping. We need to find these anomalous locations so that we can do some serious, sustained, long-term scientific investigation. Real stuff, not TV show skinwalker stuff, That's what I'm about. I'm passionate. I'm a researcher. It's been doing this for a long time. I've seen a lot of the bullshit come and go. The noobs come out and they don't know the subject.
Mm-hmm.
Lou Elizondo was up there working for Galileo Project, helping pinpoint places, and he didn't even know what Hestelin was.
Oh.
I mean, come on, think about it. What does that mean?
One of the things I've brought up a number of times on this show basically is the necessity of us, almost a la Thomas Kuhn, to refactor or review how we actually gather and understand evidence. Because it seems to me, and again, my approach here is largely kind of psycho-spiritual and consciousness-based, but it seems to me that our existing models and frameworks for interpreting the world around us are useful but limited. And it feels to me like anomalous phenomena very much may test and exceed the bounds of conventional frameworks, particularly, I would say, like even the scientific method or like instrumentation and measurement in laboratory settings, et cetera.
Right.
And so that's just actually just sort of a comment. Would be curious to hear any of your responses. But I also loved what you said here about developing something of a curriculum or having kind of a shared reality or consensus on what constitutes the study of the UFO or the study of ufology. I would love to hear you expand a little bit on what you would envision that kind of curriculum to contain and what kind of materials you think would be useful to create a well-informed constituency in the subject.
Well, we can look at other, say, multidisciplinary studies, and we can look at, there's an established history. There are definitely movements. There's acronyms. There's, we know that we've seen the history of UFOs, and we've seen through documentaries, like stuff that James Fox puts out, great documentaries that sort of give you a review of the history. But to have an academic curriculum, you're going to have to develop not only the history, but you're going to have to go through the movements. You're going to have to go get expertise on, the different government projects. There's going to need to be different multidisciplinary approaches, sociological, psychological, yeah, it's you're going to have a basic program, but you're also going to have to bring in all these other different fields. I think a textbook, like some sort of a basic textbook, would be a good way to go, and then have other courses that get into specifics. I think some of this stuff can be done online. Some sort of accreditation type classroom, where you go through like, the UFOs of World War II, you go through like the media influences of the 1950s, all the different projects, the science fiction cultural influences of the 70s. There's so much to work with there, as well as the philosophical questions pertaining to, what is sufficient evidence, the what constitutes proper methodology, what is it going to take to get these issues out there, and there's cultural impacts, within the arts, television, movies, music. I got a list of like almost 400 UFO and flying saucer related songs that you could do a whole semester course on, and there's a lot of stuff like that. There's UFO cults and specific cases, and it's something that I think should be talked about. I think whatever happens, say there is a disclosure, say there is some sort of a paradigm shift. If that's the case, then history is going to look back at all this no matter what.
Sure.
So it's going to happen. It's going to happen either one way or another, unless the subject, dies, which is possible too. I think in the next few decades, we're going to have drones and fake videos and photographs are going to make things a lot harder, to figure out what's real and what's not real.
My follow-up question to this, and then I'll turn the floor back over to the other gentleman here, is if you have any recommendations on either organizations or individuals that are, in your opinion, doing this well.
Well, there's quite a few. You're not going to see a lot of them on
History Channel.
UFO Twitter.
Yeah.
Or you might see him on UFO or on History Channel occasionally, but people like Dave Marler, who's a friend of mine. He's also from like the St. Louis area. Great guy. Some of the old time people, Jan Aldrich and researchers like that, that know the history, that have engaged in field research, that know the topics and the issues. I think there's I've always advocated for like a mentoring system. I think it used to be there, and then it sort of didn't, and but yeah, find yourself somebody who's been in it a while, somebody who's been a researcher for a few decades, I think. But again, we're the field's sort of a hodgepodge of a lot of different things. There's so many different views. There's so many different interpretations of cases. A lot of biases. You have people within the field that are experiencers, so they have sort of an invested view of things, and it is a cause to them. It's almost they proselytize the subject in a lot of ways, because they're trying to get people into this worldview. So it's tough. I would say, like what you were saying, Leah, read some Kuhn or some of the other the great philosophers of science. Start looking into that and start questioning, who is being the critical thinker, who is being rational, who is being a celebrity, or who has a particular narrative. yeah, you need to ask those things and gravitate towards people that are, like Dave Merler and others, I think.
Well, Michael, you mentioned philosophy of science and interpretation, and Karl Popper talks about that a bit. He talks about observation, being the part of the scientific method where you're producing, predict reliable predictions, and then there's interpretation, which is separate from observation, and those are separate and equally important in his view. Now, on the side of observation, it's kind of interesting because a lot of the time, the observations are pretty similar across a wide variety of people who take the subject seriously. And the interpretations differ very widely, but the most extraordinary interpretations are the ones that people are most familiar with. We talked a bit previously about how interpretations are shaped heavily by your primary social group. And I'd love it if you could just talk a little bit about the circumstances where you were encouraged to actually engage with paranormal phenomena in your home growing up, and how you were shaped in your interpretations of those things, and how you sort of developed your current approach that is, sort of holding back from those more extraordinary interpretations.
It may seem like I'm holding back from those extraordinary interpretations, but it really depends on the case. And it really depends on the evidence that we're talking about. I'm not a closed-minded skeptic. I've been involved in this subject for 46 years, like I said. So I've seen a lot, I've read a lot, and I've experienced a lot as a paranormal travel writer. I spend more time in haunted locations than I do UFO locations. And, I visit dozens and dozens of these to document them every year, as well as cryptids. And I go to a lot of these different conferences, and I experience things. And, for me, it's not just experiencing it. It's not just documenting it, although I have documented quite a few interesting things. Ultimately, we need to start figuring out how we're going to overcome things like what Leah was saying, incommensurability issues. We're dealing with a transient phenomena that we don't even know how to research it. Okay. And we keep saying it because we want to put everything into one thing. Okay. And some of them may be connected, but the only way that we're going to really be able to study them, because we don't want to just believe. Okay, I'm open to a ghost existing. I'm open to a dog man existing. I'm open to a portal opening up and a being from another dimension coming here. Okay?
Hell yeah.
I don't
bring the woo, man.
I don't want to just believe it. I want to know it and I want to understand it. If something is coming into our material world that we exist in, and we can have a whole debate on whether or not it's really a material world or a hologram or whatever. Sorry, we're stuck in the material world. That's all we have to work with right now. Okay, and we have logic and we have critical thinking. We have methodology, and that's how we come about understanding things, not just believing it. Okay, so I want to go to a place where there's consistently a portal, and I want to scientifically study that, not write a book about it or do a TV show about it. Okay, let's figure out how it works. Okay, if there's a ghost in this building, okay, we need to localize it. That's why I do my GPS stuff. And we need to study it long-term scientifically, not in an exploitive way, but scientifically. And if there is something there, and I can tell you this, folks, there are places where there are things there. Mm-hmm. There are places where things happen.
Dude, I love this. Keep going.
Not happen. There are things. I will tell you this, as a paranormal investigator, as a researcher, the most common thing that happens, the most common paranormal event is synchronicities. Mm-hmm. And you would not believe the amount of synchronicities that I experience as I'm going from one paranormal place to another. Okay. Little things, words, how words align and all that sort of stuff. But, when it gets to a certain point where you're recognizing those things and we could discuss whether or not there's biases and all that. But when you're aware of these things and you're looking for things, when you're looking for photographic anomalies and all that stuff, and things to happen a certain way in certain places, it goes beyond probability. And I don't think it goes beyond the impossible, because I'm coming from logical, scientific philosophy of science base. Okay, there's an explanation for something as to how something works, and I think the universe is probably fractal. I think chaos theory sort of controls how things work within it. So there are probably places and times and areas that where some of the probability stuff just breaks down, and I'm interested in that, because I think that's how we can overcome incommensurability. Because what incommensurability has got us is we're Bigfoot is UFOs, Bigfoot is fairies, UFOs are fairies, jinns. We're sort of bringing all these different religious archetypes. Thank you, Jacques Vallée. To try to explain a lot of different mysteries. And that's what we need to look. Each mystery on its own merit, each bit of evidence on its own merit, and not every case is going to have the same cause. That is a fact. In fact, most cases are BS. Most cases, are misinterpretations, hoaxes, people seeing stuff, real anomalies. And when I say anomalies, I mean anomalous locations, anomalous objects, anomalous beings, creatures, any sort of thing that is anomalous. It exists. It's worthy of study, and that's where science should be. And ufology has not done any. Right. Since the 80s, people are writing books, people are writing screenplays, doing all that. But conferences used to be about presenting papers. Okay, people used to present papers, scientific papers, symposium papers. And I've been lobbying the field probably about 8 or 9 years now. Lobbying people like Rich Hoffman, 8 years ago, back when he was with MUFON. Different people telling them to move in the scientific direction. It's sort of going that way. It's sort of been co-opted in a lot of ways. I worry about Galileo. I worry about, the politics and Arrow and all this sort of stuff. I think we're getting more shenanigans. Sorry to tell you guys, when you're around for 4 decades and more watching this stuff, the spies are everywhere, and they cannot stop messing with the subject, and they cannot stop whispering to politicians to get them to spend money that they're going to get. And, this game's been around for a while, and it's delegitimizing, and it continues to be delegitimizing, and UFOtainment continues to be delegitimizing, and conferences continue to be delegitimizing. Some people think this is the golden age of UFOs. I say it's the dark ages.
Sure.
So if there is a intelligence involvement, what is the purport of that?
Well, I don't think there's some big giant government cabal. I think it's politics as usual. People in intelligence, when they get out of intelligence, they go to work for firms, and then they try to influence spending in a certain area. I think there is also a group of believers. I think there is sort of it's going to sound conspiratorial, but anybody that wants to challenge me on this, anybody in the field that says that this didn't happen, let's go. This has been going on since the 90s. Robert Bigelow came in, and he was wanting to get this subject, because of friends like George Knapp and his own belief system. And, he rubbed elbows with Harry Reid and people like that. And throughout the 90s, they were able to, funnel some money And into the 2000s, they were able to funnel money into, you know, these different topics and these groups that have been around since the 70s, you know, SRI and Stargate and all these people that have basically lived on this fringe area of research. And the way you perpetuate that is you have to work at it. You have to perpetuate it, you know? And, you know, these people have been working at these government programs, looking at the spooky stuff, sort of hidden away within these compartmentalized groups, you know, for decades and decades.
I'm sorry. You know, I was going to jump in and just comment as well that I don't think it necessitates believing in some far-reaching conspiratorial cabal to acknowledge that there are sort of forces within the government or within the military that either address or hold themselves to particular philosophical or theological interpretations of what this is. I think about all the Christian dominionists that have effectively taken over the US Air Force and Space Force who see anything anomalous as demonic or a source of evil or satanic forces. And you don't really need a conspiracy theory to know that. This is stuff that's pretty openly talked about. I mean, this is stuff that like Ted Cruz talks about this stuff. But I wanted to surface a question from one of our audience members here, Tiftastic. She says she's a big fan and wants to know if you could expand on your point about political operatives infiltrating the topic. I know you just talked a little bit about that, but if you have any more color to add, I'm sure she would appreciate it.
Well, it's not so much political operatives as operatives infiltrating the topic and then using the topic for politics. That's sort of a different thing.
White supremacy, xenophobia. Yeah, we see a lot of that, right?
I mean,
anti-Semitism.
I mean, you have a lot of different viewpoints within conspiratorial realms. And disclosure people may not think that they're conspiratorial, but their whole basis is that there's a conspiracy, you know, to cover up an alien reality and that the government has evidence and they're suppressing it. And that's sort of the, you know, the whole basis behind that is a conspiracy notion, which has come from the culture and has come from UFO media, building up a narrative. And there's legitimate stuff that's worthy of consideration in there, as long as it's looked at in a legitimate way and not in a way that is promoting any sort of narrative, you know, which I worry about Arrow now, you know, and Gillibrand, and it is sort of being influenced by only one particular view, sort of, you know, within this threat narrative in order to create a political circumstance. But there has been official intelligence involvement, you know, within the subject since its beginning. I don't think it's ever stopped, really. I think even a lot of the, you know, the so-called whistleblowers or ex-spies, they're still working within the intelligence community. They still retain their, you know, some of them, their intelligence classification and such. So, yeah, it's easy to be paranoid when you're in this subject for a long enough time and you interacted with intelligence people. You know, Majestic 12. Anybody? You know, there's the history is replete with, you know, Blue Book messing around with things and Condon and if you don't know the history of that, you know, you need to open up some books. I go to my Facebook. I got a great bibliography for you to read at, and that's what we need to do too. People need to read, and when I say read, I don't mean read all of, you know, Gods and War or anything, Secret War, you know, Tom DeLonge's books,
Secret Machine,
and then, whatever. And I'm saying read dozens of, you know, real, you know, history of the subjects. There's so much more. There's such a wealth out there of information that we don't need to keep reinventing the wheel just so we can, you know, beat at the pork barrel trough, you know?
It also feels like the current kind of flap is very much serving as a Trojan horse to drive a lot of these militaristic defense narratives. It feels a lot like I think for the small segment of the population that genuinely cares about this stuff, it's a very effective vehicle, not only for undermining faith in government institutions and sort of dismantling consensus reality, right? This is why I think like Tucker Carlson brings these guys on his show, but also as opportunities to bring larger conversations about threat narratives and espionage and drum up, I think, increased militarization. As well. I mean, that's sort of what we were seeing about this whole balloon flap in China recently.
I was about to say, look at how people reacted to that Chinese balloon. It's gnarly.
Yeah, and it's not even, I mean, it's a legitimate threat narrative. It's always been legitimate. Anytime something is flying in our airspace that we don't know what it is, you know, it's an issue. I think what you're saying, Leah, is, you know, has there been a concerted effort to bring this forward in order to influence defense policy? And the answer is yes. And the balloon thing even brought that home even more. And yeah, that was a way, you know, to sell it. You know, if the Chinese didn't send those balloons, I mean, we could have sent them ourselves if we're trying to influence, you know, if intel is influencing politics, we could have done it ourselves. But really, there is, I think, within the subject, and people that study UFOs also need to get outside of UFOs. They need to study the history of aviation.
Yes.
They need to study drones. They need to study meteorology, geology. You know, there's a lot of other things that they need to study in order to have, you know, philosophy, like I said. But drones, really, I think there is a secret drone war going on. And if it's not like a war, it's almost there, and people are thinking about it, and people are thinking about, you know, non-equal actors, because I can tell you this, I know this for a fact, there are secret drone groups out there that do a lot of this stuff, and they do it on purpose, and they have fun, and they test the boundaries. You know, I come across, you know, as a travel writer, you know, urbex people and people that like to trespass and go into places. And there's a whole subculture of people that make their drones look like UFOs and like to fly into military bases. There just are, you know, and some of these cases are that. And that's why we need to look at things individually, because some may be a drone, some may be an interdimensional craft. You know, I'm open to that. I'm open to proving it, and I'm open to understanding it, you know, not just saying it. But yeah, there's a drone war going on, and within the next few years, not just a drone war, but a corporate takeover of the skies, because within the next 10 or 15 years, our sky is going to be partitioned. Businesses are going to be doing deliveries through drones. We might have flying cars, guys. We're going to have robot cars, certainly within the next 10, 15 years. So picture in 20, 25 years, the sky is flying around with all sorts of things, right? And
it's like the Fifth Element.
The government wants all that stuff. They want every square inch to be accounted for, because they don't want crap flying into each other. So they want the skies partitioned. What they want is the sky to be monitored. All the cameras that are pointing at us are eventually going to be also pointed at the sky, because our roadways are going to become the sky as well. So there's not just a drone war. There's, you know, sort of and you're seeing a lot of these UAP businesses popping up, because that's what they're really going to be about, UAV, and they're really going to be about land in the sky. You know, these corridors are going to be controlled and bought and owned, and that's what there's a lot of that going on too. And there's also, we got to worry about Chinese drones, because they are real, guys. They have drones, they have balloons that can drop drones. You know, study your aviation. There's a lot of information out there If you're really into UFOs, you should know what's in the sky. Period. It's sort of a no-brainer. A lot of people are too busy, fighting on Twitter to really do the studying that's necessary, and hopefully we can get some reform, or at least get people talking about it, and maybe get a reform conference and talk about the future. Everybody's talking about steering ships and all that, but who made you captain, right? So the community, if it's going to be a community, it needs to start acting like a community and not Game of Thrones.
Well, back to the paradigm shift that you alluded to earlier. If you think it's coming, like what do you think are the broad contours of it? Like what is the actual phenomenon, to use that word again, that you think might be going on?
Well, is there a singular phenomenon? What does that mean? Does that singular phenomena account for everything? Because it can't, because some of those interpretations that people have are sort of contradictory to other interpretations, and we know through evidence that some interpretations are just wrong. So, just logically speaking, we have to throw out the idea of singular phenomenon. Are there a variety of phenomena there that account for aerial anomalies or even ghosts or cryptids or whatever? I think there possibly are. I think you might have some sort of temporal anomaly. You might have a location that induces some sort of hallucinogenic effect. You might have an area with geological activity that can create some sort of buoyant plasmas, that are, natural Earth lights. Are they extraterrestrial? Maybe extraterrestrials are here as well. Okay. But if we're going to understand these things, we need to truly understand them and not just speculate on them. The field is rife with speculation. We need to get beyond the speculation and get to the data, I think.
But when it comes to,
I was going to say, let me just answer, as far as the paradigm aspect to it. Is there discovery science to be had? Absolutely. If there is a localized place that is electromagnetic, or it is a particular GPS place that consistently demonstrates anomalies, beyond probability measures, and we can do probability measures, that's how we should be finding areas to research, not Catalina Island because the TV show said it should be based upon actual scientific data. We need to understand it. I'm open to, say, a ghost existing, but what we need is that ghost in a bottle, or we need some sort of instrumentation to where we can understand what it's comprised of. How is a consciousness able to move around and interact materially? What is the connecting aspect between the two? There may be some sort of discovery science, within quantum science. A lot of people are suggesting that the spooky action stuff and us observing and creating our reality somehow can, affect matter, or the whole notion of a holographic reality. If this is all hologram or holograph, that's, we're doing what the program says, I guess. So, there's always something to be learned. There are paradigms to be shifted and changed. It may even be an extraterrestrial visitation one. Okay. But there's going to be a high threshold of what consensus is going to need to happen in order to get that paradigm to change. And it won't be through government proclamation. It's going to be through scientific evidence. It's not going to be through intuition. It's not going to be through a boat. It's going to be through demonstrative science. Even if you're saying that you can't demonstrate the science, you're not going to convince anybody beyond just faith. Beyond just trust me. Witness testimony is a good place to start, but witness testimonies within the scientific realm is is really weak evidence. Even photographic and video evidence is weak secondary evidence. We need long-term sustained scientific monitoring of something in order to understand it. We need a ghost in a bottle. We need a piece of UFO metal. We need a Bigfoot hair. We need the evidence. And people like Ted Phillips in Missouri. That's the sort of ufology that I want to get back at. The mentoring system. Hynek was his mentor. And what did he do? He went out to these places, thousands of them, went to the spot where people saw stuff, engaged the location, engaged the phenomena, gathered data, gathered information, gathered evidence, and documented it. And that stuff's sitting there right now. There's a lot of stuff that's sitting there right now not being utilized. And, we're doing all the political stuff, and it's just, we need some reform.
So you talk a lot about in cases of anomalies, not just aerial anomalies, localized anomalies and stuff. You talk about looking at them in isolation, right? Because we're kind of presuming that maybe the same causes are going behind these, and you kind of attribute that to Valet in that time period where we kind of people start looking for a kind of a grand unified theory of UFOs and other phenomenon. But I wonder if kind of like the cultural understanding of UFOs that, like you admitted, has existed since back in the 70s and a lot earlier. I mean, really since the 40s. Do you think that is influencing people too much? Because like personally, like how do you draw the distinction between a spook light or nocturnal lights? Because I would say that those are more similar than nocturnal lights in a daylight disc, right? Where are you drawing that line in between poltergeists and psychokinesis? Right? Do you think that the kind of the general cultural understanding of what a UFO is hinders the study of the topic and actually contributes to the stigma?
Well, I don't think there's as much of a stigma as people think that there is. I don't think people are necessarily losing their jobs or whatever. Within the military, within the military and industrial apparatus, people get passed over for a variety of different views, and there are camps. There are people with religious views and views the other way. We can't. There's a Collins elite. You have to know that there's an invisible college, that these people talk to each other, that these
in fact, there's an invisible night school.
There is. Right. But there's an invisible college, If you don't think that Jacques Vallée and Leslie Kean and Lou and all these people haven't been talking to each other for years, I mean, you don't know the subject, and they've been working towards this, towards an agenda, and there are camps and there are viewpoints, but, maybe back in the 50s and the 60s, you may have had, those old time guys that, that guy's a loon, I'm not going to hire that guy or whatever. But, you got that sort of thing now. I have never, maybe it's just my personality because I don't give a shit, but I've never felt bad about talking about UFOs. You don't want to talk about UFOs with me, there you go. I'm a UFO guy. So, I mean,
more in the sense that, like, serious academics aren't giving it the time just because they associate it with the stories they understand culturally.
Yeah, there's that.
On an individual level.
Well, a lot of academics are not educated in the subject, and they are part of the culture too, and they see, a cheesy documentary and they think, oh, that's pseudoscience. I'm within the subject. I believe in UFOs. I've had encounters, and I say that, that's pseudoscience crap. What are we doing? That's a bunch of baloney. That's not scientific. Why are you doing that? That's not the location. Why are you doing that? The UFO didn't look like that. The history's all wrong. That show Project Blue Book drove me nuts.
I actually kind of like that show, actually.
Well, I guess for a science fiction X-Files ripoff, it was okay, but you know what? You did not need to do all that crap. The real story is so much more interesting. The real cases are so much more interesting than any machination that, people can come up with. So people see that stuff, that entertainment or the manipulative stuff, or the the bad documentaries, and even people within academia see that stuff, and they say that's baloney.
Right.
And that's on us. That's sort of my notion that I've had, that for so long ufology's been like, oh, the government and the media and the culture, everybody's out against us, and it's their fault that we don't know the truth. They're the ones hiding it and all that. And it's like, no, it's your fault, ufology. It's your fault, UFO community. You have not brought it. You have not learned philosophy of science enough to change the paradigm. You talk about paradigm shift, but you don't know what the hell that means. And you're not producing anything. You're not producing anything but ufotainment. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there needs to be a balance. And I think we can fund a lot of the science stuff if we, tell Ancient Aliens to cough up 10%, or AlienCon to cough up 10%, or, all these UFO celebrities that are going on UFO cruises to cough up 10% of your cruise money. Mm-hmm. Okay. And some people say, oh, you don't make a lot. Yeah, you may not make a lot at a conference, but you'll make a lot if you're doing a conference every week. And in between that, you're doing TV shows, and you're also selling books. You can buy a house.
A lot of this reminds me sort of the spectrum of spirituality that exists, where we have these like mega churches that function as entertainment vehicles, like Joel Osteen is a good example, all the way through the spectrum of, say, like dedicated devotional practice or lay practice that does not exist on big screens or on Twitter. It exists very privately. And it seems to me so evident that ufology overlaid with New Age metaphysics, spirituality, etc., suffers from the same kind of problem, where you have this entire spectrum ranging from just buffoonish, vacuous entertainment and gullibility all the way through people that are quite serious. And one of the things, watching right now, we have Jeff, and one of the things he talks about a lot is basically how the greatest researchers in this subject are not generally publicly visible. Like the best research and conversations that are happening around ufology, they're certainly not happening on UFO Twitter, that's for damn sure. Maybe some of it's happening on Facebook, but most of it's happening kind of in these, I would say, private like research enclaves. And that to me feels like finding opportunities and ways to bridge the gaps between these enclaves into some kind of distributed network of information sharing and distribution, to me seems like super promising, especially as a lot of these old guard guys, they live in houses filled with archive boxes, and like, how do we know what they have? How do we sort of connect dots between different research efforts?
I think that's really important for, kind of new people. And Mike, you mentioned all these kind of post 2017 people kind of onboarding, and the first thing that they hit is this kind of wall of UFOtainment media. And I'll use kind of an analogy. Any new paranormal investigation group or ghost hunter group, the first thing they do is go out and buy EMF meters. But you ask any ghost hunter why they use them, and they couldn't tell you. So I'm just kind of wondering if the kind of UFO narrative, as we all culturally understand it in the States, is kind of hindering people from the jump as they approach, because that is just kind of the most prominent kind of perspective on the subject. And how do you get around that? Well,
I think, entertainment science, as far as the paranormal, has sort of been locked, the past 3 or 4 decades, maybe, into, they're driving there, and then they do the background supposition thing, and they already know the lore and all that sort of stuff, and it's just, they're going through a theatrical sort of thing. It's not a real investigation. Right. I've challenged Bigfooters, I've challenged UFO people, and I've challenged ghost hunters. And I'm just a dude with opinions. If you think I'm an arrogant asshole, that's fine. I probably am. You don't have to listen to me. But guess what? I'm not going anywhere. I have an opinion. I can say it. Don't like it? Tough. Sure. But I will say, that if you're trying to be an entertainer, I guess you got to go that route, right? Yeah. You got to be the agent, you got to play the game, and you got to read the script, and you got to put the makeup on, and you got to have the camera pointed at you instead of pointing the camera at the anomaly, right? So, the cameras are sort of pointed in the wrong way in a lot of ways. And I think if we're legitimate and we're serious about pointing the cameras in the right way, it needs to be a scientific, methodological program, not an entertainment one where you bring, you know, stars of ancient aliens and stuff to do rituals at your location or whatever. I guess that makes for okay TV, but it's delegitimizing if you're trying to be legitimate. If you're trying to be legitimate, what you want is you want data. And what you want, if you have a haunted house, turn the lights on.
Right.
Get the house for a couple of years, put cameras and equipment everywhere, set up an array of scientific equipment, and monitor it for years.
Yeah, the funny
nobody around looking at in the green camera, you know, acting shocked, and you know, meanwhile the anomalies over there, you know, that's Bigfoot shows, that's UFO shows, and that's ghost shows.
Absolutely.
James Fox has done that. All your Bigfoot people, you know, your ghost adventurer people, they do all that sort of thing. But you know what? If that place is legitimately haunted, or if that place legitimately has some sort of cryptid, let's get rid of that stuff. Because like you said, you know, these things have become cultural archetypes through the media, through entertainment. That's where we get it. People aren't reading scientific journals about UFOs, mostly because there aren't any anymore. You know, they're watching a History Channel or a Discovery Channel or a Travel Channel, and they're watching pseudoscience, non-science, UFO celebrity people that are, you know, on this. It's similar to vaudeville. I know this because I traveled all these things. They have tables and they have, you know, all their stuff set up, you know, because it's like a sideshow. It's a circus. You're there to see celebrities and take pictures. Some of them charge money, which I think is freaking ridiculous. You know, I just wonder what people like Hynek would think, you know.
Well, we actually have a decent idea of that because Dr. Hynek went and visited a few of the people like George Adamski, and he wrote about that, right? He was pissed off that Adamski kept interrupting his own story to try to sell him photos that he took of the beings, right? That were, we found out later, were entirely fake, which Hynek assumed at the time.
Yeah.
So, but you were talking a little bit about the interpretation stuff and the entertainment side of it, and it's like, you know, certain interpretations sell, right? Like if you lean into sort of like interpretations that entail, like you were sort of describing earlier, like a radical paradigm shift. It's the whole disclosure narrative. It's very similar to like an apocalyptic narrative. People who kind of are looking for a big change in the world, it appeals to them, right? And so I'm curious, like for your interpretive side, like when there is that draw, that's such a strong draw that people have for finding a interpretation that is appealing to them. Is there any benefit to providing an interpretation of some kind? You know, not just saying we don't know, or that it could be a bunch of things, which it could well be. It is interesting that many of the scientists like Hynek and Vallée and all of this like concluded that it was like one thing ultimately, which is, you know, kind of intriguing to me. But is there any value in doing interpretations to kind of use evidence to draw people away from those more entertainment-based, extraordinary ones?
Well, you know, everything is open to interpretation. If something is legitimately still unknown, then it's always going to be that way, barring the absence of any additional evidence. You know, people have this idea that somehow, you know, let's talk about disclosure for a second, you know, what that means. And it means different things to different people. But largely it means, you know, an official confirmation of alien reality from a political authority, and maybe with, you know, some sort of revelation of, you know, an alien, or, you know, some sort of evidence that supports that worldview, or the hopeful idea for an undeniable event. You know, that's another fantasy within, you know, the disclosure realm. If people have ideas of, you know, that's what they want. And I think there's a lot of people that have this fantasist view of and it's sort of, if you put yourself within that, it's sort of like a noble thing. It's like you're fighting the man, you're getting to the truth. There's a secret hidden, X-Files type stuff, right? If you grew up watching Fox Mulder, you get to be it, or you get to LARP it or pretend to be it. But as far as an underlying truth within all that, I think there's a lot of truths to discover. I think you have to be proactive. I think we have to study the past, and through studying the past, I've gone back to Ted Phillips cases and have visited some of these locations and other classic locations, and there's still evidence there. There are places where there's still evidence. There's still broken trees. There's still rings on the ground, from cases that are 40 or 50 years old, guys. And who's doing the long-term scientific study of that? Nobody even knows it's there because nobody's studying the past. So we have to study the past, but most of the cases throughout history, we will never get an answer. You won't know what's at McMinnville. Even if aliens come down, the aliens may say, "It wasn't us. We thought that was a hoax." We think that even if aliens come down, it's going to confirm every interpretation. Billy Myers is going to be right. Bob Lazar is going to be right. It's like, no. There's a lot of interpretations out there of evidence and cases and speculative theories that are just wrong, and they're wrong. A lot of them just because they're bad history. They're not scientific. They're not critically thought out, and they're just logically impossible because if somebody's coming from Venus, then the same galactic civilization is not coming from Mars. You know what I'm saying? So it's like there's just a lot of these different interpretations that are mutually exclusive. So what we want to do is we want to narrow it down, and I think that's what Hynek and Vallée, they're interested in the real high strangeness stuff, because that could be distinguished from lights in the sky, which is the vast majority of UFOs. Most UFOs are just things in the sky that regular people don't know what they are, or even trained people don't know what they are, because they don't know about optical illusions or different craft or balloons or astronomical sort of stuff. Human beings are human beings. But the very small, minute amount of real anomalies are exceedingly rare. And you're hearing about it afterwards. So you just can't rest on the story. You can't rest on the credibility of somebody. You just can't rest scientifically on a narrative. Okay? We have to know. We have to be able to engage actual phenomena in the future proactively to be able to study it. Are we going to be able to go back and find out what the dino beavers were at Skinwalker Ranch? No. Never. We will never, ever find that out unless somebody gets a dino beaver. And we can cut it open and we can find out what the hell it is. I don't think we ever will, though. Or maybe we will. I don't know.
Why do you think that there is a, let's call it an institutional bias within ufology in favor of the ET hypothesis?
I don't think that's true anymore. I think there's probably because of the influence of Vallée and Keel, who I grew up reading. I read everything. I love the speculative thought stuff. Some of that stuff makes sense. I don't think we can prove that when somebody was seeing a fairy in the 1800s, that was an alien, or that Ezekiel's wheel was a UFO. We can't. You can believe it. You're never going to be able to prove it unless aliens come down and travel back in time and show you that they did it. But really, the dominant theory I think now is a morphology of an interdimensional theory. that there's some sort of secret world within ours, a parallel universe very close to ours, and that a shadow realm, sort of a Stranger Things type world, maybe a spirit world, maybe just a metaphysical consciousness world. You got to be open to those. We start getting into religion when we start talking about consciousness and souls and places where they reside, and are you enlightened enough? Are you at a proper vibration in order to experience this reality? That's religion, and that's something also within UFO reform is something that we need to look out for, because at any moment a UFO cult can come along and destroy any credibility that you have. There could be if there's another Heaven's Gate next week, guess what happens to hearings? And then we get touched, and it could happen because there are belief systems and there are fringes of people. And sorry to say, guys, and this is another reform thing, there are mentally ill people within this field. And there are people that exploit the mentally ill within this field. And there are people that exploit them for money, and they exploit them for believers and followers, and they pretend that they're doctors when they're not. They pretend that they're hypnotists when they're not. They pretend that they're psychiatrists when they're not. And they're bringing in money, and they're creating a pseudo cult. And, we're sort of witnessing the emergence of a pseudo cult where people are talking about the phenomenon won't let us see it. The phenomenon will reveal itself when it chooses to reveal itself. It's a deification and anthropomorphization of a collection of mysteries across time and place and distance, and people misreading Valet, or not even reading Valet at all, or Keel, sort of morphing everything into this exploitative cult stew, where consciousness is behind it. Consciousness is behind everything. There's a non-human intelligence that is able to shapeshift and be a trickster, a magical being, like a godlike being that can be invisible, can manifest himself like a genie, and can change reality and warp reality and morph reality. And okay, maybe somebody just saw, a secret government jet. is that the genie? It's no, but there are people that is sort of has come, and it's sort of out of this invisible college group. People like Leslie Kane and Ballet, and they sort of have been promoting this idea. How put off, that there is an invisible world, an invisible universe, and somehow we can magically tap into it, or it can tap into us and change reality. And okay, but how are you going to prove it? You still got to prove it. If you don't prove it, it's a belief system. If you don't prove it, it's a religion. If you're getting people to spend money and try to psychically communicate with UFOs through CE5, or go to some retreat, you're exploiting that. You're trying to create a cult. You're not creating an open-minded, critical thinking enterprise. You're creating a pseudo religion. If you can legitimately do CE5, you need to do it under scientific conditions. Prove it.
But the phenomenon does not want to be revealed.
The phenomena does not want to. The phenomena is a trickster. It's transient. Your mind wasn't in the right set. There's all these unfalsifiabilities saving the phenomenon, things that happen within, these belief systems and these conspiratorial realms, as the philosopher Feyerabend said, it saves the phenomenon. People are always trying to save it. And it's an unbelievable form of cognitive dissonance. And people you've seen it on Twitter. You've seen people defending evidence that is bullshit. That's a fake video.
Yes.
But the right person's sharing it, and this whole group of people, because they're insiders of some little club, because they're being manipulated by other insiders in some other little club, just amazing.
It's funny that this kind of like more wooey interdimensional hypothesis, if you want to call it that, actually predates the ETH. I think that's what all the Fordians were talking about, kind of pre-Arnold, right? I mean,
it's a religious concept, I mean, our religions have that notion that there is another realm, that we have a soul within our body, that there's some sort of transmigration, soul consciousness.
Yeah, it's piggybacked.
Say consciousness, you mean soul. I'm a Buddhist. I'm a practicing Buddhist. I've been a practicing Buddhist for 30 plus years.
Yes, we got to talk about this.
Well, and I'm from Missouri too, so I'm a show me practical sort of guy, and I come from a scientific background, and it's not mutually exclusive. Buddhism actually, their tenets in all different varieties of Buddhism is logic and critical thinking and arguing different sides of arguments. I'm open to any interpretation of evidence. I'm open to any theory interpretation of cases, speculation. I think they shouldn't be as declarative as they are now. I think they should be, temporary until you can bring something with it. But that's the problem. We're all pundits. We're all pundits, and nobody's doing the nobody's actually playing the game other than social media stuff. And there's a lot of social stuff within the community as well. You guys know that there's camps and there's groups and there's rivalries and there's business rivalries and there's competitors and there's people that really hate each other's guts. There's people that would punch each other, and there's people that would probably get along. If they had a beer, smoked a little something, because we
don't condone drug use on this show, Michael. Come on.
We're all UFO nerds. We're all UFO nerds, and I've tilted a few beers back with draconians and but I'm going to challenge them too.
I look, I was super excited about you coming on because as you just touched on, I would love to Dharma talk with you a little bit. I'm very curious about your Buddhist practice, if you're associated with any kind of lineages, and then also how these practices may inform your understanding or exploration of ufology.
Well, I try to keep my my UFO stuff separate from my religion. It's kind of an interesting concept for a lot of people because ultimately my beliefs are my beliefs as far as the meaning of life and reality and.
Could you touch on those for a moment? I'm curious about your opinions on those things.
Well,
just briefly, not the entire thing, but
we experience the universe through, what we're in, right? It's so we have to recognize, I think, that we exist locally, and we're perceiving the universe through our own viewpoint. And for all practical purposes, you are your own universe. Because unless there's an afterlife, and we can debate what that means, what is there an afterlife? Where is that? What is that? What goes there? How does it go there? What's it do there? How long does it stay there? How does it interact?
I suspect it's very similar to the before life, as in nothing was existing.
Right. We can at least extrapolate that that's probably the case, that we go back into some void, and from our viewpoint, the universe would cease to be. And it sounds very depressing, but Buddhism can also be very depressing. It's realizing. Well, it's
I think that's such a Western interpretation of these ideas of emptiness.
I'm a Western Buddhist.
Yeah, I am a Westerner. Yeah.
I'm a Western Buddhist. I read the Zen Buddhist books, and I used to work at Barnes and Noble, so I would read everything, and of course
Sure.
I studied philosophy in college. So I've read all different schools of Buddhism, and the basic tenet is that life is suffering, and the reason that we suffer is because we're attached to things, either ourselves, our reality, our viewpoints, all the things around us, and we're dissatisfied, and that dissatisfaction leads to misery. And the state of humanity is a state of misery. That's your sad Buddhism there for you. The Four Noble Truths, and how we get out of that is you don't really get out of that. You just have to make sure it doesn't bother you, and you try to have the right concentration and the right action and the right livelihood, the right thoughtfulness, the right mindfulness, the right effort, the right speech, the right thought, and the right understanding. Those are, basic Buddhist tenets. And are you going to succeed? No. Are you perfect? Yes, you're perfect. Everything is as it should be. You exist within the now. You exist within the eternal now. And there's nothing you can do about it except exist within that now. Until you don't, and you will go back into that darkness. And is life futile? Is life useless? Is life horrible? Yeah, but it's also beautiful, and it's precious, and it's going to be the only one that you have, unless somehow, and this is also a Buddhist tenet, there's not really a reincarnation. There's not really a transmigration of your soul, because there really isn't a soul. There's these heaps, these aspects of your being that do persist, at least in some metaphysical component, and somehow that is able to manifest itself in other ways. That's a belief. That's a religious belief. It's maybe it's something that will be discovered scientifically. Maybe a lot of these things will be discovered scientifically. I think, as I've said, the universe is chaos.
Mm-hmm.
The universe is fractal, and the universe is infinite, but it's also, within that infinity, there's also other infinities. And yeah, we're going off on a big philosophical tangent.
No, this is
I'm not perfect. I don't get to meditate as often, because I'm watching a baby and I got kids and all that, and I'm fighting with people on UFO Twitter or sharing UFO stuff. But
that's samsara, man. UFO Twitter is samsara. We are trapped eternally in the cycle of death. There,
we're all drops in the same ocean. And yes. I try not to give people a hard time. I will debate people. I will argue with people. But I challenge anybody to say where I've just gone out and just called people names.
Oh yeah.
I may characterize people.
Argue with people at all. I genuinely do not. It's bad juju, man.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, is there a particular lineage or tradition that you practice in? Or have you kind of just moseyed through a number of them? I asked just because I'm a practitioner and took refuge earlier this year in a Vajrayana lineage, so I'm super curious.
Okay, I'm losing you.
Oh, it's breaking up.
Can you guys hear me or see me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can hear you and see.
Sorry. No, I've read the Dhammapada and researched the Theravada and stuff. There's been a couple of different temples around in this area in Missouri, but no, mostly I got a little meditation couch here.
Awesome.
I try to make my travels my meditation. I try to go to these places and be quiet and just sort of put myself in these anomalous places and get my my meditation and my my experiences hopefully at the same time.
Yeah, I totally understand this. I think of that line from The Snow Leopard by Peter Matheson, that the religious ceremony is life itself, right? That's sort of the objective, that we bring these practices off the mat or off the bench or off the pillow and into daily life, where they can actually propagate. Super cool.
And I'm not going to begrudge anybody, their practices or their rituals. Everybody has them. Even scientists have their rituals. Even skeptics
like
have
putting on
their
your
rituals.
lucky bra before a date, right? It's magic. It's ritual.
Yeah, and there's superstitious aspect to us. We're in the 21st century, but we still believe in deities and we still practice.
We're barely out of the jungle, man.
And holidays. Yeah, and sometimes they work, which is what's interesting. If a ritual can work, like I've said, synchronicities, thinking of things, and I think there's probably something there to remote viewing, at least within a very narrow area. But still, I want to know how it works. Are there waves that go out, or things? Is there a mechanism within the brain that operates? There's things to discover. And rituals are fascinating. I have rituals, and I go to these conferences and I go to these places, and you see a lot of different techniques, and you could say that it's a technique, from the classic techne, way of doing things,
or a technology, even. Yes,
that's all we're doing. We're a bunch of matter. We're hairless apes made out of matter, moving a bunch of stuff around, and then a bunch of atoms are triggering stuff on, sparking up here. Is it going somewhere? Is all this data lost? Is all this data going to some sort of Godhead? Because you would think by definition that would be a necessity. If God exists,
right, then
God would have knowledge of everything. Therefore, he would have to exist in our experiences, right? So we are God, but anyway.
Yeah, I'd hate to not bring this up. And you've, throughout the show, you've kind of criticized the modern conference scene a bit, but you have started your own. You had one last August, right? And are you aiming to do that?
Oh, talk about this.
Well, I've talked to some people, been talking to people for quite a few years about reform conferences.
Yeah.
And getting rid of the salesman stuff, getting rid of the merch stuff, and all that. And you've had, like SCU come about. I lobbied Rich for years, to get a working scientific conference. And I was at the first SCU conference at his invitation, interacting and causing trouble. But I don't want to change the culture, because UFO conferences are fun and there's a social component. And a lot of these people, there's some people that really, it's their only family, especially the older people who've been going to some of these things. There's a social component, and you don't want to get rid of that, know, but you also don't want to exploit that. And these people, have been working for decades to achieve legitimacy. So, I've been pushing for reform conferences. The conference here in Cape, which was the first paranormal conference that Cape had, I think it was a good start. We'll have to fine tune some things. I think we got some legitimate speakers talking about, not the woo stuff, but talking about the scientific issues. Because you are dealing with a lot of the same issues with all these different anomalous areas, Bigfoot, ghosts, UFOs, they all deal with the same problems. They deal with, celebrity exploitation, trying to achieve proper methodology, trying to come about evidence, and there are people that are okay with just doing the ritual. They get on it,
Yeah.
and they show each other their catches, and it's almost like fishing. It's like, oh, look what I got a ghost. Oh, I got a UFO. Look, it's like, okay, that it really means nothing in a lot of ways.
Maybe personally, though. I mean,
Personally.
it's fun, and it can be a hobby. I would go ghost hunting again for sure. And when I say ghost hunting, I mean like what you think of with ghost hunting.
Yeah,
because it's fun. But
yeah, and when I say reform, I'm not like Lou was saying. Ufology needs to be destroyed, which is like that's so brain dead.
Those are fighting words.
It's like, don't you know the history of the UFO subject over the past 75 years? And an intelligence guy is going to come along and say, F you, Dr. Hynek, we're going to destroy ufology. It's like, that's the way some people hear it. It's like, what? Who the hell are you, dude? You came in this like 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 8. It's like, but anyway, it's
new things don't have to replace the old things.
Reform, not destroy, not throw everything out. It's like, let's get some papers up there. Let's get some documentaries. Let's not do everything through Prometheus, so you can get the value on the speaking circuit up. That's what the basis of a lot of it is, value in the speaking circuit, and that's why people do media.
So do you intend to continue and maybe host some other ones in the future?
I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. I would really like, that was more of like a unity conference. I would really like to talk to people and eventually get a reform conference, where people talk about what they want, they want. Let's talk about where we want to go. Let's talk about where we want to steer the ship. Let's talk about what we want for evidence. Let's talk about what's legitimate and what's not. Let's talk about, how we're going to change a paradigm. How do you go about changing a paradigm? How do we educate?
Like a visionary conference, basically.
Right. Let's have some workshops. Workshops on, building proper methodology and building a library and building a curriculum, not, crystal readings or, 20 and back, or, you have too much of that sort of stuff at conferences, the kitschy TV stuff. And we need to professionalize the field. And the only way you're going to do that is make it professional and create some sort of group, a union, and have conferences and have a curriculum. And imagine if we could get a university to put out at least a degree. Okay.
That might convince me to go.
Imagine if you had a degree in ufology. You can do it. We can create it.
Dr. Nick.
Doctor in ufology.
No, it's. I'm not kidding, and I'm not laughing. I mean, I'm not. You can laugh, but
thank you.
It sounds weird.
There is this
weird, but I think there are
legitimize and standardize a curriculum here, so that there's some floor around what is considered legitimacy in the subject.
Any field that's been around long enough has an expertise to it. And I think one that's been around for, 100 years, because I'm going to go back to like the 30s with the War of the Worlds, because that really propagated the culture, I think.
Sure did.
But, even airships before that. But 100 years, of this subject. It's equally as old as civil rights movement, maybe not as important, maybe more important, maybe important just for the sake of science. Maybe it can make us look at problems differently, because like you said, Leah, there's issues with trying to study this stuff, because we're dealing with transient phenomena that is disparate and, maybe has a deliberateness behind it that makes it hard to study, but these things are not obstacles to just rest on. You don't just rest on a witness account. You just don't rest on an interpretation or speculation. That's the beginning of your investigation.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Go further than that. You don't rest on it. You develop a program, and
Yes,
that's what we need.
It also feels like, assuming that we treat the question of ufology and non-human intelligence with the substance and respect that it deserves, right? Like let's say we're working within this container where this is literally one of the largest and most important questions to ever face humanity and has existed in perpetuity basically across all times and cultures and theologies for all of human existence. Like, that in and of itself confers a degree of substance and import that to me effectively necessitates some kind of standardization of how the subject is approached and explored. And I don't mean just from a empirical scientific perspective, but also spiritually from a religious and anthropological perspective. But yeah, I'm totally with you in the sense that to fail to do this is to also completely fail to acknowledge and recognize the inherent critical importance of the questions that the field is asking.
Yeah. And there are some important questions out there.
Mm-hmm.
The underlying thing that we have to consider is the big question is, are we alone or not?
Mm-hmm.
And we already know the answer to that. We know that we're not alone. Just within scientific probability and mathematics, we know that. We know that they're somewhere out there or somewhere closer to us. We still don't understand how the universe works in a lot of ways. There are some intelligences out there. Now, the big questions arise as to what level of interaction, and we can have different interpretations over the history of humanity as per, religions and the archetypes and archaeology and all that. But barring any sort of proof, a lot of it's going to be, it's going to be supposition, and we still would need to know, okay, what race of aliens was influencing the Peruvians?
The tall Nordics.
Aliens.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we have our ideas, but where are we getting to a lot of our ideas? A lot of our ideas are bad ideas, and we
so true.
And like I said, mutually exclusive. Maybe not. It would be great. It would be fantastic if everything was like a Marvel movie, where there's multiverses and there's aliens and there's people living out on the other side of the moon or inside the moon.
These are the meta models that fuel the conspiracy cultures.
It's like it would be fantastic. It would be great. I'm a scientific dork, so some of that may be true. I think if any of that outrageous stuff it is true, it's probably some sort of temporal us from the future, or some sort of artificial intelligence. If we're just speculating, because it would make sense, because we're sort of evolving into that, right? If we're not already there, we may be artificial intelligent things right now experiencing this universe.
That's something that I noticed coming into the subject, as I think, Michael, you said like something like a UFO noob. I was coming at it from the outside, like from the materialist, academic thing. And we're talking a little bit about the conferences, studying the subject. And what I saw in the literature was that there was a breaking off at a certain point. Perhaps 1994 in Hesdal in Norway is the first good example of this, the scientific conference that Erling Strain called after doing those repeated observations. And it was titled something like Luminous Phenomena in the Atmosphere. And then he brought in, a couple dozen scientists from around the world. A variety of papers resulted from that. They all concerned the production of ball lightning-like phenomena naturally in the atmosphere. And what I've seen since is, the verification that ball lightning exists in 2014, and that these phenomena are being described in hundreds of physics papers in detail in the exact same way as Dr. J. Allen Hynek described them in his original, the observationally identical features. And at the European Geophysical Union conference is where these papers are being presented about these phenomena. And, there are all of these published papers about these things. And we sort of are getting around like, oh, what is a UFO? What isn't a UFO? Like these physicists in the papers, we think many of these things are UFOs. My view is identical to Arthur C. Clarke's in the 50s. Many hardcore unexplained UFOs may be ball lightning. That's his quote. And his final description of the subject before he passed away was, if there are extraordinary UFOs, I believe there's some kind of atmospheric effect. And that's my position. So we're sort of dancing around it. Do you think that there's any validity to what I'm saying? Is there actually continued legitimate study of this subject occurring in a different sphere? And sort of the UFO thing is sort of this zombie walking forward on its own momentum. And we are there's validity in discussing the culture and stuff, but like, is that actually ufology rather than the study of the objects themselves, maybe?
Well, I contend that ufology is the study of UFOs and everything in it. The culture, the history, the cases, the movements, the personalities, the literature, the influences. Just like any multidisciplinary thing. And within that is the scientific mystery and the investigation of that scientific mystery. And I think, as I've said, each case has its own merits. And I think there is adequate evidence to suggest exactly what you're saying. If you go back and look at, like the work of Corliss or other people that have explored the idea of, even Harley Rutledge wrote about it in Omni Magazine, the idea of some sort of either atmospheric, some sort of ball lightning, some sort of unknown atmospheric phenomena related to electricity or magnetism that we're not aware of, or something that is created geophysically, similar to that. Either way, it's high electromagnetic field buoyant plasmas that some have speculated that within a certain range, it may, affect human perception. They did studies at Persinger, I think, at Laurentian University, did studies with the God helmet that demonstrated electromagnetic effects on certain parts of the brain can induce, hypnagogic experiences. Some would argue that the God helmet is a God helmet and actually can transcend into another reality. That's
right.
But at least we know that it's a hypnagogic induced thing where, aliens and ghosts and different sort of things similar to, the night terror phenomenon can be demonstrated. And I think in some cases, in some localities, some of these places where there are spook lights, some of these places where there are earth lights, where and there's been consistent reports of these things tied to geographical locations like Hesselen for, decades. I think there is a legitimate natural physical phenomena there worthy of scientific study, geologists and physicists and atmospheric scientists. And they should do that. And they should do that because it's an aerial anomaly, and anomalies is what science is supposed to investigate. And it's supposed to do it in a scientific way. And I think I think with things like ball lightning, and we're discovering new things about the atmosphere every year. When I was growing up, we didn't have sprites and all these, these sky fairy lightning things that we're seeing, and it's only going to get more like that, to where it's going to necessitate that we study atmospheric science and that we study all the things that are in the sky. If we're going to engage in the scientific stuff. Erling, he's got his work cut out for him. He's done a fantastic job. I think Hynek was visiting him, right before his death, and
Yes.
recognizing that at least in some cases, there is a geophysical connection that may result in a variant phenomena. And maybe even in some locations, it may be some sort of temporal phenomena, or it may be some sort of gateway phenomena. I'm open to all these things, but I'm open to not just logging them and visiting them and documenting them and GPSing them, but hopefully eventually we can get instruments. And I think, instead of spending millions of dollars at alien cons and TV shows, I think we can get $40,000 worth of equipment, start popping it down into places like the Marley Woods near me, which is Missouri Walker Ranch. There are places like that. There are places where, since I do GPS, divergent anomalies, not just UFOs, I'm able to see things that a lot of people aren't. You'd be surprised how many haunted, UFO, anomalous, cryptid places intersect. And it goes beyond just folklore. When a place has a variety of anomalies, that's when it's truly interesting. And like I said, I think localization and doing things like Hestlin, we need thousands of Hestlins, and we need thousands of Galileo stuff. And the Galileo stuff needs to be scientific and not intelligence. It needs to be scientific and not TV show. Okay, I know they're going to put a camera in Catalina.
Oh yeah.
Because it's Hollywood.
Don't tell me you wouldn't watch that.
Those TV people love. Oh, let's go to Catalina. Demi Lovato did all that stuff, right? It's like, yeah, of course they're going to put one in Catalina. Has Catalina had UFO encounters? Yes.
Sure.
Is Catalina a statistically, scientifically validated hotspot? No. There are 100 other places that are more anomalous than that. Okay. And that's where you're seeing, unfortunately, I think, Galileo might be, they have Ancient Aliens people on their staff. They have Lou Elizondo in their group. What are they telling them? And Arrow too. Who's influencing Arrow? Are they getting all the same regurgitated TV show stories, from people that really don't know the subject, or they have a biased view of the subject? I worry about people like Senator Gillibrand being influenced by people like Lou Elizondo or even Leslie Keane. Okay, I respect her, but she's biased. She is not a journalist in the sense that she's not a UFO activist. She has been a long time UFO activist, and she has a very particular view of the phenomena. And there's a lot of people within their insular group, that orchestrate and collaborate and organize, behind this movement. And I think it's going to ultimately be another delegitimizing thing. The next few years are going to get stupid. They're really going to get stupid.
You heard it here.
Yes. Michael, on that note, the next few years are going to get stupid, and boy, howdy, we are here for it. Where can our audience find you?
UFO Twitter.
The cursed realm, the hell realms. Got it.
No, social media, Instagram, Facebook, all that sort of stuff. I'm there. I write and I blog and I travel and I enjoy doing that. And I put the UFO celebrity thing. I've been in documentaries and all that sort of stuff, and that stuff's fun. And but we can do all that too. But sure. I think we need to be honest and we need to be real and we need to honestly look at things and be legitimate with each other and stop blowing smoke each other's asses. It's decades of just so much baloney, and it's coming from us. And you can find me on social media. I'm accessible, and if you have any GPS data or a case or anything, if you want my opinion, or if you want to visit somewhere, I'll be able to help you out there. Just Google my name. I'm sure some stuff will come up, pictures and articles and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Michael, thank you so much for joining the Invisible Night School tonight. Just delighted. So glad we had the opportunity to connect. I'm going to put you off the stream. Then we'll all say our good nights and we'll all get our beauty rest. So again, Michael Huntington, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasure. Have a nice night.
Thanks for coming, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
What do we think? That was a really good one.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yes. Any parting words before we hang up our mics for the evening, folks?
For once, I actually have something that I did related to UFOs.
Really?
Last Wednesday, within an hour before I lost power, I was interviewed on a YouTube channel, Sean Atwood Unleashed. He does like true crime stuff, but he has like 770,000 subscribers. And I did a 30-minute interview on there, and that should be coming out in the next like 4 or 5 days. So that should be interesting.
Nice. Yeah, post the links all around so we can see it.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll do.
Anybody else up to anything cool? No.
Lewis, anything with you?
I'm working on a couple of things, but I'll get back to you.
Sure.
Oh.
Secretive.
Nice.
What about you,
Nice.
Nick? Anything going on?
Yeah, I'm. It's not UFO related. I'm playing in a webcam magic tournament right now. It's a very niche format called Old School 94, 90 or 93, 94. So it's just the first 2 years of the game, and I'm playing with people all over Europe and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool.
Wait,
So
what
I-
is this?
Man, I don't even want to get into it now.
No, wait, I missed the first
Gathering
couple
the
words you
game.
said.
Yeah, there's
What kind of game?
Magic the Gathering. There's a very niche
Oh.
format that's just the first 2 years of the game, and it's very popular in Europe. So I'm playing webcam games with them. So I got the 2 cameras set up right now.
Is that streamed anywhere, or is it just one-on-one type thing?
So is it on your OnlyFans, Nick? Tell us.
Yeah, how can I pay to see that?
I think the kind of like the top 16. It's a Swiss tournament, so the top 16 I think will be on YouTube, and I will share it for anyone. Anyone, there's a crossover here that's watching that is actually interested in the, like I said, a very niche format of kind of a niche game.
This is real
Should
nerd
check
stuff.
it out. Yeah. I think I'm pretty good, so you probably should check it out if it ever
Well, you're
comes
gonna have to
out.
prove it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they'll cut me.
Share the links.
They'll cut me for time, like Unsolved Mysteries did. And
Cool.
but, yeah.
All right. Well, this wraps up another episode of the Invisible Night School. Next week, we'll be doing an open lines episode. Finally, I know that our scheduling got super weird for a little bit, but we'll be back next Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern for open lines. For anyone tuning in, open lines are great. Jump on, join the conversation, talk about whatever you want to talk about. I'd love to give some updates too on, I was in New York last week for the Inquiry into Anomalous Experiences and the Phenomenon. I've gone to every conference now in that series put on by James Iandoli and J. Christopher King. So happy to give some updates and thoughts on that next week as well.
Yeah, I want to hear about that. I don't think we ever actually said this out loud yet, but we were thinking about, or we're considering doing an open lines once a month. So that way listeners can, prepare. It won't be sprung on them last minute. So they can, work on things they want to bring to the show.
Yes. Duncan asking to see the ring again. Yes, right now it's a white silicone ring because the actual ring is being made by a jeweler. Hopefully I'll have it sometime in the next couple of months. But yeah, I am.
Yeah, I want to see that.
Yeah, I'll make sure to show it off once it's in my sweaty little hand. Cool. All right.
Well,
any parting thoughts? Or is this it? Are we good to go?
It's my bedtime dream.
It's nice to be
All right.
back. That was the longest
I know
we've
it's nice to
gone
be back.
in months,
that's
not
true.
sitting down
Yeah.
together every week. It's good
Yes.
to be back.
Cool. All right. Well, I will see all of you, audience members, co-hosts, everyone else. See you next Wednesday, 9 p.m. Take care, folks.
Cheers.
See ya.
See ya.